The keys went down on the desk first, because Rafael had decided that, if he put the letter down first, he would lose his nerve. Lucian looked at them for a long moment without touching them. Snow was coming past the window behind him in the slow, unhurried way it does in that city in February. And the office was quiet enough that Rafael could hear the radiator ticking. "You're leaving," Lucian said. "At the end of the month. It's all in the letter. Where are you going?" "To find a mate." Rafael kept his hands flat against his sides so they would not shake. "I'm 30. I want a house with my name on it and a child while I still can, and I can't get either of those things from your kitchen." Lucian did not raise his voice. He never had, not once in 6 years, which was why the 4 words he said next landed on Rafael the way they did. Why not me? And Rafael, who had loved this man since he was 24 years old, heard himself answer with the one true thing he had sworn he would never say out loud. "Because you don't even know what I smell like." Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now, back to the story. The house sat near the top of the mountain, on the curve of road where the city drops away underneath you and the river shows itself between the rooftops as a flat gray seam. It was stone, and it was old, and in winter it took a while to warm the front hall if you closed the doors properly, and half the morning if you did not. Rafael had learned that in his first month. He had learned a great many things in his first month, and one of them was that the man who owned the house did not know how any of it worked. He came at 24 because an agency sent him to cover. The last steward had gone into a care home and nobody had replaced him. And the house had begun to do what empty houses do, which is to go quietly wrong in 100 small ways at once. Rafael walked through all of it with a clipboard. And at the end of the second day, the owner of the house came home late, hung his coat on the end of the banister instead of the hook, and said, without particularly looking at him, that he could stay if he wanted. That was the interview. 6 years later, Rafael still had the clipboard. By the winter this story starts in, the house ran like a good machine. Invisibly. He woke before it was light. He put the kettle on and unlocked the side door for the woman who came twice a week to do the heavy cleaning. He ordered the winter tires in October and the salt in November. He did the accounts on Tuesdays. And he hired and let go the seasonal staff himself. And none of it appeared in anybody's diary except his own. And every morning of every one of those years, first thing in the morning, he stood in the kitchen and poured coffee into a white cup for a man who came down the back stairs already dressed, and the smell of that man went into him like a hook into a fish. It was not a nice smell, exactly. Nice was the wrong word for it. Cold beeswax first, like the church near his mother's house in the hour before anybody arrived. Then something dry and sharp underneath it that Rafael had eventually worked out was ink. Real ink. The kind that comes out of a bottle and lives in the paper afterwards. And under that, buried so low that Rafael had gone almost a year in that house before he found it. A thread of black licorice, bitter and old-fashioned and faintly sweet, the sort of thing an alpha would be embarrassed by if he could smell himself, which of course he could not. Nobody can smell themselves. That is the first thing they teach you about your own body. So Lucian had no idea. He came down the stairs with his cuffs already done, and he said good morning. And he took the cup, and in 6 years he had never once given any sign of knowing that the man handing it to him had to arrange his face first. "There's a car at 8, Rafael said. That morning in the middle of winter. The road's bad past the reservoir, so I moved it earlier. Thank you for watching. That's not Conamin, then seen, with min. When die high liver. Then strek together in the Potawara. The please to beals, and strek together, fine. The medical people want you at some point this month. You've moved it twice. Move it again. I've run out of reasons that don't sound like lies." Lucian looked up from the paper. He was 46 that winter, and he had the sort of face that photographs badly and works very well across a table. All straight lines and no give in it, and gray coming in at his temples in a way he had clearly decided to ignore. When he looked at you directly, it was uncomfortable. Not because there was anything cruel in it, but because most people never look at anything for that long. "Then tell them the truth," he said. "Tell them I don't want to go. I'm not saying that to a doctor. You say worse things to me. You pay me." "Yes," Lucian said, and went back to the paper. "I do." That was as close as they came to a joke. He was the chairman of a life and health group, which in that city meant a stone building on Beaver Hall Hill with his family's initials carved over a door that nobody used anymore. His father had run it before him and his grandfather before that. And there was a portrait of one of them on the 4th floor that Rafael had seen once at a Christmas party he organized and then spent the whole evening in the kitchen. What the group actually did was decide what people's lives were worth. Lucian used that description himself, without apology, at dinners where the other guests would rather he had said something about families and peace of mind. They took your age and your work and your parents' deaths and your designation, and they turned all of it into a number, and the number decided whether you could afford to be ill. Omegas paid more. Everyone knew that. A heat was classed as a recurring event with a foreseeable hospital risk, and every underwriter in the country priced it accordingly. And if you had ever once been admitted during one, you might not be offered anything at all. Rafael knew those tables like a rule that has already cost you something. He had been admitted once, at 19, and his premium had gone up the following year, as everybody said it would. And then, in his 2nd year in that house, it had come back down again, and the letter had said that his rating had been reviewed and adjusted, and he had been so relieved that he had put it in a drawer and not thought about it again for a very long time. He should have thought about it. The rest of that morning went like all of them. The car came, and Lucian went down the mountain into the city, and Rafael stood in a house that still had the smell of him in it and got on with his work. He was good at the work. His friends from before had drifted off, as friends do when you keep working the evenings they are free. But he held the keys. He signed for the deliveries. He knew which of the 2 boilers was lying about its pressure, and he knew that the man who slept in the corner room upstairs slept badly in the week before a board meeting, and he knew the exact face Lucian made when a phone call was going to end with somebody losing their job. There was nothing small about knowing a life that well. It was only that nobody had ever asked him whether he had wanted to spend his own life learning it. He was 30. He had done that arithmetic more nights than he would admit to. At the back of the house, past the laundry, there was a door that stayed locked. It had its own small bathroom and a window that looked at the wall of the garage. Rafael had cleared it out in his 1st year and put a bed in it and a lock on the inside of the door, and he had never once told anybody why. Everyone in that house knew why anyway. 4 times a year, more or less, his suppressants stopped being enough and his heat came. He would feel it coming for a day or 2 beforehand, the low ache in the small of his back, the light starting to feel too bright, and he would do the shopping early and leave a list of numbers on the kitchen table and go into that room and turn the lock. And every time, without a single word passing between them about it, Lucian would leave the city. It was always something plausible. A meeting in Toronto, a funeral, a property in the east that needed looking at, which Rafael had eventually established did not exist. The car would come and take him away on the morning it started, and the house would empty out around Rafael like water going out of a bath, and he would spend the worst days of his year alone behind a locked door in a building that smelled of an alpha who had made very sure to be a long way from it. He had told himself, for years, that this was decency. That was the word he used. A decent man removes himself, he would think. Lying on the floor of that room with a wet cloth on the back of his neck, and everything in him screaming for something that was not there. It took him a long time to work out that decency does not usually require you to pack. On the last Thursday of every month, he drove out to the residence in the East End to see Hollis. Hollis had run that house for most of his working life before him. He was in his 70s now, and he had a room on the 2nd floor with a window that looked at a parking lot, and he was the only person alive who understood exactly what Rafael's days were made of. Rafael brought him tobacco he was not supposed to have and, in winter, clementines, because Hollis said the ones they gave him tasted of the box. He was an Omega too, which mattered, in ways neither of them said. "You've got a face on you," Hollis said. "It's the drive. It isn't the drive." Hollis peeled a clementine in one long strip, without hurry and without waste. "Go on then." So Rafael told him about the boiler and the man from the roof who had wanted cash and the board dinner he was going to have to cook for. And Hollis listened with his eyes half shut, and then he said the thing that broke the winter open. "Do you know what I regret?" Rafael looked up. "Nothing," Hollis said. "That's the trouble. I don't regret a single thing I did in that house. I did it all beautifully." He put a piece of fruit in his mouth and chewed it and looked out at the parking lot. And then I came here. Nobody has to be told when I'm ill. Nobody's birthday to remember. And I sit in this chair and I think, well, I stayed. The radiator under the window made a noise like a coin dropped in a jar. I was very good at staying, Hollis said. Then, after a while, and not kindly, you'll go and do the other thing, I expect. Everybody does, once they've had a look at me. Rafael did not say anything for a while. Down in the parking lot, a woman was scraping ice off a windscreen with a bank card, and doing it badly. And he watched her because it was easier than looking at the old man in the chair. He asks after you, Rafael said finally. He does not. He does. He doesn't say your name. He says, is everything all right out east? Hollis laughed at that. One dry cough of a laugh. And then he was quiet. And when he spoke again, his voice had changed. Has he ever said anything to you about how you smell? Rafael stopped what his hands were doing on his knees. No, Hollis said, and nodded slowly, as though something had been confirmed that he had suspected for a long while. He never told me either. And I was in that house 30 years. They go blind to you in the end. Nobody warns you. Blind how? But Hollis only looked at him, and then reached over and patted the back of his hand twice, briskly, as you comfort someone who has not yet been told anything, and said, bring me the ones with the leaves on next time, if they've got them. Rafael drove back into the city with his jaw aching, and he did not put the radio on. The registry office was on the second floor above a pharmacy, which he thought was probably deliberate. He had expected to feel something walking in. Shame, maybe. Instead, there was a woman with a headset and a stack of magazines about property, and a poster of two men laughing on a beach with a line underneath about beginning again. He filled in the form on a clipboard, which he found funny. Name, age, designation, heat history, including admissions, employment, and hours, and whether those hours could be varied. And then, near the bottom, in the same size type as everything else, do you currently reside in the household of an unbonded alpha? He looked at that question for a long time. He ticked yes because it was true. And then underneath, in the box marked further information, he wrote, I am staff. He handed it in and she read it through and made a small sound. You know that has to be disclosed to matches, she said. The residence thing. I know. Some of them won't like it. Then they cannot like it, Rafael said, and she looked up at him, and after a second she smiled and stamped the form. He got the first name back within days. A man called Emmett, 34. Alpha, who taught the second year at a school in the north of the city and had a face in his photograph like somebody who had been asked to look serious and could not quite manage it. Rafael read the file, standing up in the pantry with the door shut. He was ashamed of the pantry afterwards. He was 30 years old and he had read a stranger's file standing up in a cupboard in another man's house, like a boy hiding a cigarette, and when he heard the front door go, he had folded it into his back pocket and gone out into the hall with his face arranged, and said, There's soup, if you want it. Later, Lucian said. He was taking his coat off. He had snow in his hair. Your car has no grip. My car is fine. Your car came up the hill sideways. I watched it from the window. He hung the coat on the hook, which he had learned to do, eventually, over about 4 years. It's booked in for Thursday. They'll give you something to drive. I didn't ask you to do that. No, Lucian agreed, and went upstairs. That was how he did it. Every time. He never gave you anything you could hand back. He gave you tires, and appointments, and a pharmacy account that Rafael had discovered had no upper limit on it. And once, after Rafael mentioned that his mother's stairs were bad, a stair lift, installed and paid for and never spoken of. His mother rang him crying, and he sat in the car outside a hardware shop for a while before he could drive. You could not fight a man who did that. There was nothing to push against, and it was killing Rafael, slowly, in a way that nobody would ever be able to put on a form. He wrote the letter that night. It took a few attempts and came out shorter than he expected. And he read it over and thought, this is the most important thing I will ever write, and it reads like a delivery note. And then decided that was fine, because he was not going to give a man like that anything to argue with. He waited until the Friday, because it was payroll, and because he had spent 6 years arranging his own life around the shape of that man's week, and could not stop doing it even for this. Then he took the lift to the 4th floor and walked past the portrait he had seen once, and the woman outside Lucian's office looked up and said he was free, in the voice of somebody who assumed Rafael was there about a dinner. And then the keys went down on the desk, and the letter after them, and Lucian said, "You're leaving." And Rafael said the thing about the kitchen, and the snow came down behind him, and the radiator ticked. Why not me? He said it exactly as he said everything, with no push in it. It was a question from a man who had already run the numbers and simply wanted the last figure confirmed. Rafael heard himself answer, "Because you don't even know what I smell like." The room went very quiet. He had never said anything like it in his lummies. He had spent 6 years being careful, and he had just put the whole of it on the desk between them next to the keys. And there was no version of what came next that he could survive. "You're wrong," Lucian said. "Am I?" "Yes." "Then say it." Rafael's voice was doing something he did not have control over. "Go on. You know everything. You know what my car's worth and what my mother's stairs cost and what I earn to the cent. Say what I smell like." Lucian did not answer. He looked at Rafael, and he opened his mouth. And for the first time in 6 years, Rafael watched the man's hands come off the desk and go still in the air. And then Lucian closed his mouth and put them back down, one on either side of the letter, very carefully. "That's what I thought," Rafael said. He got as far as the door. "Rafael." He stopped. He did not turn around. Behind him he heard the chair go back, and then footsteps, and then nothing, because Lucian had stopped too, a few feet away. Close enough that every part of Rafael knew it. "Stay until the end of the month," Lucian said. "That's what the letter says." "I know what the letter says. I'm asking for it anyway." A pause. When he spoke again, his voice had gone quieter, and there was something under it that Rafael had heard twice in 6 years, at funerals both times. "And I'm asking you to let me try, in the weeks I've got. Properly. Not like this." "Try what?" "To be an answer to the question I asked you." Rafael stood there with his hand on the door, and the snow going past the window, and his own pulse in his ears. "You've had 6 years, he said. "Yes." "Why now?" And Lucian said, "Because the house is going to be quiet." Which made no sense at all. And Rafael went home and did not understand that sentence for weeks. He expected nothing to happen. He drove home through the salt and the slush, fully prepared for the next weeks to be exactly like the last 6 years, only with an end date on them, because men like that said things in offices and then went back to work. On Saturday morning there was an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside it were 2 pages, typed, with numbered paragraphs, and a space at the bottom for a signature. Rafael read it standing up with his coat still on. "Proposal," it said. "Terms for the period of notice. His employment would end at the end of the month as he had asked. His final pay and the balance of his leave would be settled that week, whether he worked another day or not. The house would engage an agency for the cooking and the accounts from Monday, at no cost to him, and nothing he was owed would be reduced, so that he was not required to work in a house where he was being asked a question." And then paragraph 4 said, "I am asking for the remaining weeks to be spent as 2 men, and not as an employer and an employee. And I recognize that I cannot ask that while I am paying you, which is why the previous paragraph exists. If you decline, nothing in this letter is withdrawn." He sat down on the kitchen chair with his coat on and the envelope on his knees and laughed until it hurt. Lucian came in from the hall a little while later, because of course he had been in the house the whole time, waiting somewhere out of the way like a man who had posted something and could not go far from the letterbox. "You've written me a contract," Rafael said. "I've written you the only kind of thing I know how to write. Do you know what this reads like? It reads like a settlement. It reads like the thing you send somebody the week before they'd have gone to a lawyer. I know how it reads." Lucian stayed in the doorway. He had not shaved, which Rafael noticed, and then wished he had not noticed. "I wrote 4 other versions. What were they like?" "Worse." Rafael looked down at paragraph 4 again. There was a comma in it that had been added by hand, in ink, in the same small square writing that went into the black notebook. "I'm not letting you pay me to be courted," he said. "That's what paragraph 2 is for. Paragraph 2 is you paying me not to work while you court me, which is the same thing wearing a hat. Lucian did not argue. He came in and pulled out the chair opposite and sat down in his own kitchen like a man who had been invited, and it hurt Rafael to look at. Then tell me what you'll accept, Lucian said. I keep working, Rafael said. I keep the keys. I keep the accounts. I do the board dinner because I already ordered the fish. I don't want an agency in my kitchen for the last weeks I'll ever have it. He put the pages down on the table. And whatever you think you're doing, you do it out of this house. Not here. Here I'm staff, and I've been staff for 6 years, and I'm not going to stand at that stove and try to work out which version of you I'm talking to. Out of the house, Lucian repeated. Out of the house, Rafael said again. That's a small city in February. You'll manage. You've got a car. Then I'm still paying you. You are, Rafael said. That one's yours to sit with. It isn't mine. Something moved at the corner of Lucian's mouth. It was not a smile, but it was near one. Agreed, he said. That's it? No counter? You've thought about it more recently than I have. He stood and took the pages and folded them back into the envelope with the care of a man handling something that had cost him. At the door he stopped. Rafael. What? I do know. Know what? What you smell like? He said it to the doorframe rather than to Rafael. I'm not going to prove it to you in my kitchen at 9 a.m. with your coat on. But I know. He went out. Rafael sat there for a while, and then got up and unpacked the shopping and put the fish in the freezer. And it was only when he was folding the bag that he noticed his hands. The work does not stop. That is the strange, dull, human part of it. He had told the man he loved that he was leaving, and the man had asked him to stay. And the gutters still needed doing before the thaw. So he got the ice off the gutters. He had the chimney swept and the roof cleared, and he wrote out the winter routine in a notebook for whoever came after him, page after page in his neat hand. This boiler lies. This window sticks. He will not eat fennel and will not tell you why. And in the middle of all that, at the end of the days, that man came and found him. He never came inside. He kept to it exactly, which Rafael had not expected and which undid him more than any speech would have. He would ring from the car at the bottom of the hill and say there was a place on Pine Avenue that stayed open, and Rafael would come down with his hair wet and get in, and they would sit in a booth in a diner full of taxi drivers and say almost nothing for an hour. Off his own ground, Lucian was almost shy. Not soft. He never got soft. But the man who could sit across a boardroom and tell somebody exactly what his life was worth had no idea what to do with a menu and a person he wanted, and he ordered the same thing every time out of what Rafael eventually understood was panic. You've had the pea soup 4 times, Rafael said. It's good soup. You don't even like peas. I've cooked for you for 6 years. Lucian looked at the bowl as though it had betrayed him. And then he said, I don't know what I'm doing. So plainly, so entirely without performance, that Rafael had to look out of the window at the snow for a moment. No, he said. I can tell. They talked, in those booths, like people do when the whole subject is off limits, about the group and the school Lucian had hated, and a man on the board Rafael had never liked the smell of, and Hollis, and every so often Rafael would push at the edge of it, because he could not help himself. Where do you go? When? You know when. The waitress came past with the pot and filled them up and went away again, and Lucian turned his cup a quarter turn on the saucer and said, A hotel by the airport. You don't fly anywhere. No. 6 years and you've been sitting in a hotel by the airport. Yes. Why? And Lucian said, Because it's the furthest I can be and still get back inside the hour. And then he looked up and saw what that had done, and neither of them said anything else for a long time. The first time anything happened between them was over a shirt, which was such a small, stupid domestic thing that he was embarrassed by it for years. There was a dinner. He had the shirt on the ironing board in the little room off the laundry, and he was doing the collar. Because the woman who came twice a week did not do collars as that man liked them and had once been told so, tactfully, by Rafael, who then did all the collars himself forever afterwards. He had said no house. He had said it clearly. But there was no time left before the dinner, and Lucian came in with the tie in his hand and the shirt not yet on him, and stopped in the doorway and said, "I need that. You need to give me 2 minutes. I need it now. Then you'll go out with a collar like a crisp packet and I'll have to hear about it." Rafael did not look up. The iron went down and hissed, and the smell of hot cotton came up between them. 2 minutes. Lucian did not leave. He came and stood at the end of the ironing board. He was in his undershirt. Rafael had seen him in less than that. In 6 years, coming out of a bathroom, ill with a fever one winter, and he had trained himself not to react to it the way you train yourself not to look at the sun. It did not work in that room. The room was small and warm and full of steam, and the man was near enough that the beeswax and the ink came right through the smell of the hot cloth, and under it, faint, the black licorice, which meant that whatever was happening to him, he was not in control of it. "You're in the house," Rafael said. "I'm aware. That was the one thing I asked for." "I know." Lucian's voice had dropped. "Tell me to go." Rafael put the iron down on its heel. He should have told him to go. He had a whole speech about it. He had rehearsed pieces of it in the car. And what he did instead was pick up the shirt and hold it out. And when Lucian reached for it, Rafael did not let go of the cuff. They stood there with the shirt between them, both holding it, the steam going up past both their faces. "Give me your hand," Rafael said. Lucian gave him his hand. Rafael turned it over, palm up, and pushed the sleeve of the undershirt back with his thumb, and put 2 fingers against the inside of that wrist, where the gland sits under the skin, and pressed, once, as you would take a pulse. The reaction went through the whole of the man's arm. "That's what I smell," Rafael said. His voice was not working properly. "That's what I've had every day since I was 24. Beeswax and ink and something bitter underneath. And when you're not managing yourself, it comes up out of you like a lit match." He pressed harder and felt the wrist turn under his hand, not away, into it. "So don't ever tell me again that I don't know what's going on in your body. I've known for 6 years. I'm the only person in your life who has." Lucian's other hand came up and closed around the back of his neck. He did not kiss him. He put his forehead down against Rafael's and held there, and his breath was coming badly. And up close, at that range, the licorice was so strong that Rafael's knees stopped being reliable. "Say it back to me," Rafael whispered. "Now. Right now. With your mouth on my face. Say what I smell like." And the hand on his neck went rigid, and Lucian said, "I can't." He met Emmett on a Sunday, in a coffee place near the market, because the registry recommended somewhere public and neither of them had the nerve to be original about it. The photograph had been fair. He was tall and slightly untidy and came in shaking snow off a hat with ear flaps, which he apologized for twice. And he smelled of roasted chicory and warm terracotta, which is the smell of a room where somebody has been sitting quietly a long time. Rafael liked him at once. That was the problem. "I should say the thing," Emmett said, once they had the coffee. "I read your form. The residence thing." "Ah. No. I don't mean it like that. I mean, I read it and I thought, well, that's honest. He could have left it blank and let me find out." He turned his cup around. "My brother's a beta, and he works for a family out in the West, and he's never once told anyone what it's like. Nobody asks." "No," Rafael said. "Nobody asks." They talked for a long time. He was funny in a low, unhurried way. And he told a story about a boy in his class who had eaten a magnet. And he asked Rafael questions and then actually waited for the answers, which Rafael had not had from a stranger in years. He said he wanted children, and said it without embarrassment. He said he had a flat with a bad kitchen and a good balcony, and that if Rafael cooked he would do every dish for the rest of his life, and he said it like a joke and meant it like an offer. At the end, he walked Rafael to the corner and did not try to touch him, and said, "Can I ring you?" And Rafael said yes, and then sat in his car without starting the engine. Because there it was, on a table in a coffee shop, from a man in a stupid hat, a person who asked, and a flat with a bad kitchen, and children said out loud on a first meeting like a fact rather than an injury. Everything he had gone to the registry for, offered plainly by somebody who would never once make him stand in a laundry room with his hand on a wrist begging to be described, and all the way home up the mountain, with the good, decent, entirely available man's number in his phone, all Rafael could think about was a hand going rigid on the back of his neck. The board dinner was on the Thursday, And it was the last piece of that job he actually cared about. He had done it every year. The long table, the fish, the potatoes with the cream and the bay leaf, the tart he only made in winter, and Rafael in the kitchen from noon with his sleeves rolled, running it like a service. They were an ordinary enough group. Mostly tired and rich and talking about roads. Except for the one at the far end. Gideon was the deputy chairman and Lucian's cousin. He was in his early 40s, Alpha, and his voice arrived in a room slightly before he did. He smelled of cold zinc and dry vermouth. And he had never in 6 years said a word to Rafael that was not perfectly polite. Rafael brought the tart in himself, because he always did, and set it down at the top of the table. "Ah," said one of the women. "The famous one," and Gideon said it pleasantly, without looking up. "You want to keep hold of this one, Lucian. Good staff are impossible now. Everyone's got ideas." There was that small laugh that goes round a table when a thing is not quite a joke. Rafael had heard worse. He had heard much worse, over 6 years, and he had always done the same thing. He smiled with his mouth and went back through the door to his kitchen where he was in charge of everything. He got as far as turning. "He isn't staff," Lucian said, and the table stopped. He had not raised his voice. He had not put his glass down hard or made a speech. And afterwards Rafael would not be able to say what it was that made the whole room go quiet. "He runs my house," Lucian said. "If he walked out tomorrow, I'd be in a hotel inside a week." He picked up the serving knife and held it out, handle first, to Rafael, who took it because his hands were working even if the rest of him was not. Then, to the far end of the table, "I'd hate to lose you, Gideon." Somebody coughed. The woman who had said the famous one looked at her plate and did not look up again. "Well," Gideon said and smiled. "Quite right. Apologies." Rafael cut the tart, because a table of people were waiting and his hands knew how, and he served it, and he went back into his kitchen and stood at the sink with the tap running for a while. Later, when they had all gone and the girl from the restaurant had gone and the house was down to its night noises, Lucian came and stood in the kitchen doorway. He had his tie off and his collar open, and he looked, for the first time Rafael could remember, tired all the way through. "I'm in the house," he said. "I know. You are. I'll go." "You defended me in front of your own board," Rafael said. "You can stand in the door for a minute." So he stood in the door, and Rafael dried the last of the pans and did not look at him, because if he looked at him he was going to do something about it. "He'll make you pay for that," Rafael said. "Probably. He's wanted your chair since before I came here. I've watched him do it from the kitchen. He asks the caterers questions. I know what he does." "Then why did you say it?" "Because you were carrying a tart across a room full of people who have known you for 6 years, Lucian said. "And not one of them knows the name of your mother." Rafael put the pan down and held onto the edge of the counter. It was in the small hours, days later, that he found the notebooks. And he found them because of the boiler. The pressure had gone again in the night and the house had come up cold, and he went down to the cellar in a jumper over his pajamas to bleed it, and coming back he cut through the little study because the hall floor was freezing and the study had the good rug. The bottom drawer of the desk was open by an inch, the way a drawer sits when something inside has stopped it closing. He would have shut it. He had shut 1,000 drawers in that house, but the thing that had stopped it was a corner of black cloth cover. And he knew the cover, because he had watched that man write in one at breakfast for 6 years. Small square figures in a column, and had assumed for 6 years that it was money, because everything else about the man was money. He crouched down and eased the drawer out. There were more of them than he could take in. They were stacked on their sides in date order, going back, the earliest one worn soft at the corners, and Rafael sat down on the floor of that cold study in his pajamas and opened the oldest. The first page had a date on it from 6 years ago, in the autumn, which was the week he had arrived. Under it, in the small square hand, in ink, "He has done the gutters." He did not ask. Query: "What does it cost to have gutters done so that I know what I have been given?" Rafael turned the page. $16 for a haircut. He goes on Mondays. He does not eat until he has given me the cup. Correct this. Cannot correct this, without saying why. Mother. Stairs. Estimate obtained. He will try to pay it back out of wages, I set myself. Do not let him. His hands were shaking so badly by the third book that he had to put it down on the rug. He read until the window went gray. 19 years old. An admission during a heat. Hospital in the East. Rating band 4. He does not know I have seen it. Do not let him find out from a letter. And, 3 pages later, in the same flat hand, reclassified. Band 2. Done through the schedule review so that it does not sit against his name. If this is ever found, I will say it was mine. He put the books back in date order. Even then, with his hands like that, he could not leave a thing out of order. Then he made coffee, and waited at the kitchen table until he heard the back stairs. And when Lucian came down, already dressed, Rafael pushed the white cup across at him and said, "Bottom drawer of the study desk." Lucian stopped where he was. "I wasn't going through your things." The boiler went and I cut through and the drawer wouldn't shut. Rafael's voice came out level. I sat there reading them until it got light. All of them. Enough of them. Lucian did not sit down. He stood with his hand on the back of the chair, and Rafael watched him try to work out what a caught man does. He had never in 6 years been caught at anything. "Say something." "I'm deciding which part you're angry about," Lucian said. "Try the one where you got into the company's own schedule and moved my rating and wrote down that you'd take the blame for it." "That one, then." "Yes, that one." Rafael's chair went back. "Do you know what I did with that letter? I put it in a drawer and I cried in a car park because I thought it meant I'd stopped being a risk. I thought some machine somewhere had looked at me and decided I was worth insuring after all. For years I've walked around thinking that. You were never a risk. That's what the band said, and the band was wrong. That is not the point." "I know it isn't." "Then what am I?" Rafael was not shouting. He would have preferred to shout. "Go on." "Because my rent, my mother's stairs, my medicines, all of it held up by a man who has never once said a full sentence to me about how he feels." He had to stop for a second. "What's the word for that?" "Mine," Lucian said, and then closed his eyes as if the word had come out of him without permission, and put both hands on the back of the chair. The kettle clicked off behind them. Neither of them moved. "That's not an answer," Rafael said quietly. "No, it's the truth though, and you asked for one of those first. Then give me the rest of it." He came round the table. 6 years. 6 years. And every time my heat came, you got in a car and sat in a hotel by an airport you weren't flying out of. If I was yours, where were you? You don't want the rest of it. Don't tell me what I want. Rafael, say it. And Lucian said, "Because I stopped being able to smell you," and the whole kitchen went strange and quiet. Rafael heard the words. He did not understand them. He stood there with his hand on the table and he thought, absurdly, that the man had made a mistake, had reached for one thing and picked up another, as he did when he was tired. What? There's a word for it in our own medical department. Lucian was looking at the table. They use it about scent staff and about people who work in the barns out west. Acclimatization. If you live inside a smell long enough, your nose stops reporting it. Not weakens, stops. It becomes the room. That isn't. Rafael could not get to the end of it. That doesn't happen. It happens with everything. It happened with you. He said it flatly, the way he said figures. The first year I could smell you from the front door. I used to stand in the hall in my coat like an idiot working out which part of the house you were in. Rhubarb. Lemon balm. That sweetness off the citrus stalls at the market in spring. Whatever that's called. Rafael took hold of the back of a chair. Lucian looked up. You were angry with me, a great deal in the first year. You told me you couldn't say it, in a laundry room with your hand on my wrist, and you'd asked me to say it with my mouth on your face. His voice cracked and got put back. I have not been able to smell you in 4 years. What was I going to do? Describe you out of memory? Recite it? You'd have known. You'd have known in a second, and I would have had to tell you why. And I was not going to stand there and tell the person He stopped. Say the rest, Rafael said. I wasn't going to stand there and tell you I'd lost you. He stopped. And that I was still living in you. Outside, a truck went past on the mountain road with its blade down. When? Rafael said. You said 4 years. What happened 4 years ago? The ice storm, Lucian said. Rafael sat down. He remembered the ice storm as everybody in that city did. The power had gone in the West End for the better part of a week, and the trees had come down under the weight of it. Whole limbs coming off the trees in the dark with a crack you felt in your teeth. The road up the mountain had closed. Nothing had come up or gone down for days. What Rafael remembered that other people did not was that his heat had come early that week. It came early and it came hard, as it does when the pills have started lying to you. And he had gone into the room at the back past the laundry and turned the lock, and the man who always left had not been able to leave, because there was no road. He had never spoken about it since. Neither of them had. In his memory of it, there was a lot of fever and a lot of dark. The thing he had carried around for 4 years, like a stone in a shoe, was that at some point in the worst of it, he had gone to the door on his hands and knees and put his face against the gap at the bottom and said the man's name out loud, and nobody had answered. "You weren't there," he said now. "I called you." "I was there." "You were not." "I was on the floor on the other side of that door," Lucian said, "for 5 days. Rafael put both hands flat on the table. "I heard you say my name. I heard everything." He was not looking away now. He was looking straight at Rafael, and his voice had gone very quiet and very even. "I want you to understand what I know." He stopped and started again. "I had never been in a house with an unsuppressed omega behind a door. Not once. Not in my life. I could smell you through the floor, through my own hands." He looked at the table. "And the only thing between us was a lock you had bought out of your own money and fitted yourself. You could have opened it." "Yes," Lucian said. "I know. That's why I didn't." He picked the white cup up off the table and looked at it and put it down again without drinking. "On the 5th night it broke and you slept," he said. "And I got up off that floor and I went to the other end of the house, and I sat on the stairs until it got light. And a while after that I came in from the office one evening and I couldn't find you by the smell anymore. I stood in the hall like I always did and there was nothing. I thought you'd gone out. And you never said. What would I have said?" For the first time his voice went up, and it was terrible because it was not anger. "That I'd worn you out? That my own body had decided the safest thing to do with you was stop noticing you were in the room? I was grateful. Do you understand what I am telling you? I stood in that hall, and I was grateful, because a man who cannot smell you can be trusted." Rafael got up. He crossed the kitchen and took hold of the front of that man's shirt with both hands and pulled him down and kissed him. And it was not gentle, and it was not tidy, and Lucian made a sound against his mouth that Rafael had never heard out of him before. The chair went over. Rafael's back met the edge of the counter, and the man's hands were on his face and in his hair and then hard on his hips, lifting, and Rafael got up onto the counter with the tea towels still folded next to him and his knees around this man's waist, and Lucian kissed him like somebody drinking after a long walk. 4 years, Rafael said against his mouth. 4 years of sitting across a table. "Yes, every morning, Lucian said. "Tell me what I smell like." The hands stopped. "Don't." Rafael caught his face before he could pull back. "Don't you dare go. Use the old one. Use the 4-year-old one, I don't care. Say it." And with his forehead against Rafael's and his hands shaking on him, Lucian said, "Rhubarb, lemon balm, orange blossom in the spring, and something green underneath when you have had enough of me." And Rafael put his face in the man's neck and cried, quite hard, for the first time in that house in 6 years. His heat came days early, which he should have seen coming and did not, because he had spent that week living in a state no pill in the world was designed to account for. He felt it start in the middle of the afternoon while he was carrying wood in. The low ache came first, in the small of his back, and then the light off the snow went too bright, and he stood in the yard with an armful of wood against his chest and thought, quite calmly, well, that is that. He did what he always did. He rang the woman who came twice a week and told her not to come. He put the numbers on the table, and the water and the sachets and the flannels in the room at the back, and he did all of it with his hands going wrong, and when he had finished, he stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened. The house was not making the sound it made when a man was packing. Lucian. He came out onto the landing. He had his sleeves rolled and a pen still in his hand, and he stopped dead at the top of the stairs, and Rafael watched him go from a man interrupted to a man who has just walked into a wall. "The car isn't booked," Rafael said. "No, you always book the car." "I'm not going," Lucian said. You have to go. No. You've gone every time you could. His voice was not behaving. 24 heats in this house. You got in a car for 23 of them. I counted them lying on that floor. I know. Lucian did not come down the stairs. He held onto the rail at the top of them, hard, and stayed exactly where he was. I'm not going, and I'm not coming through that door either, unless you open it and say my name when you are still yourself enough to know what you're saying. If you want me to sit on the other side of it again, I'll do that. I've done it before. But I am not getting in a car. Sue. 1, 2. Rafael stood at the bottom of the stairs and put his hand over his eyes. Then come and sit in the doorway of the kitchen, he said, and talk to me while I can still hold a conversation, because in about an hour I won't be able to. It went as those days go, which is to say badly, and slowly, and with long stretches he did not remember afterwards. What he kept of it was the beginning, sitting on the floor of the back room with his back against the bed and the door propped open with a shoe, and Lucian in the doorway at the far end of the corridor with his back against the wall and his knees up like a man on a station platform, and the two of them talking about nothing. He asked what Hollis had been like when he was younger. He asked what happened to the money, if the board went for him. He asked, at one point, whether Lucian had ever wanted children. And there was a silence long enough that Rafael thought he had gone. And then the man said, only recently, and Rafael had to lie down for a bit after that. Then the fever came up properly, and the shoe came out of the door, and the lock went over, his own hand doing it. Water kept appearing. Every so often the world would come apart and knit itself again, and there would be a bottle on the boards on the far side of the open door, cold, with the seal already cracked because the man knew his hands would not work, and his own hand remembering every time to turn the lock back after. He lost count of them. He drank and lay on the floor with his cheek on the boards and thought, he has been on the other side of this door the whole time, all those years, and he was in a hotel, and both of those things are the same thing. He remembered opening the door. It was the 4th night, and the worst of it had turned into something less like burning and more like grief. He got the lock over on his second try, and pushed the door, and Lucian was sitting on the floor of the corridor exactly where he had been, with his head back against the wall and his eyes closed, unshaven, wrecked. And when the door opened, he did not move at all except to say, quietly, say my name. Lucian. Again. Lucian. I know where I am. I know what day it is. It's Thursday and the fish is going to go off. His voice cracked in the middle of it. Come in. And the man came up off that floor faster than Rafael had ever seen him move. He did not touch him at first. He crouched down in front of him and took Rafael's face in both hands and looked at him, checking, as you check a person after a fall, and Rafael put his forehead against the man's palm and turned his face into it and put his mouth against the inside of the wrist where the gland was, and that was the end of anybody checking anything. They ended up on the floor because the bed was too far. Lucian's mouth went from Rafael's mouth to his jaw to the soft place under his ear and stayed there, and Rafael's hands got under the shirt and pulled it up out of the way and heard the man swear, once, in a low, broken voice, into his skin. The whole room had gone over to him. Rafael was up off the boards, one hand in Lucian's hair and the other flat on Lucian's back, holding him down. Lucian had a knee pushed between Rafael's legs, and every time Rafael made a sound, the arms around him got tighter, until he could not tell whether he was being held or carried. Tell me to stop, Lucian said against his throat. No. Toe. Rafael, I've waited 6 years. Don't you dare be decent at me now. He felt the man's teeth graze the gland at the base of his neck, and everything in Rafael's body stood up and said yes, and he heard himself say the word, and it was Lucian who stopped. He pulled back. It cost him. Rafael could feel exactly what it cost him. Not like this, he said, with his forehead down on Rafael's collarbone and his whole frame shaking. Not on a floor. In the 4th night of it, when you would say yes to anything. If I bite you now, you will spend the rest of your life wondering whether you meant it. I'd have meant it. Then it will still be true in a week, Lucian said, and I will still be here. He picked him up off the floor and put him on the bed and got in behind him with all his clothes on. Rafael was almost gone when he felt the man's face move against the back of his neck. I can smell you, Lucian said. Rafael did not answer, because he was asleep before he could, and because if he had been awake he would not have known what to do with it. He slept longer than he had slept in years, with a man's arm across his chest for the first time in his adult life. That should have been the end of the story, and it was not, because of what Rafael did on the Monday. The fever broke on the Saturday, and by the Monday he was steady enough to drive. He would defend what he did with that Monday later. He still defends it. He went down into the city, and he did not go up to the 4th floor to see Lucian. He went to the 4th floor of the annex, and he sat in the waiting area outside the office of the group's chief medical officer, with his hat in his hands. Dr. Nevin was a beta in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain and a photograph of a sailing boat behind her, and she kept the schedule that priced every omega on the group's books, and Rafael had catered a lunch for her once. "I need to ask you about acclimatization," he said. She put her pen down. "In what context?" An alpha and an omega living in the same house for years. He stopped being able to smell me. Then I spent a heat in that house with him still in it, 4 nights of it, and now he can. Rafael stopped. "Now he can't sit in a room with me." "Ah," she said. He hated that "ah" for the rest of his life. She was kind about it, which made it worse, because kindness meant she had done this before with somebody else in that chair. She explained that the system is not broken, only switched off, and that anything that switches it back on does it hard. Usually that is distance. Which is why the barn workers out west come back from a fortnight off and cannot work the first morning. Sometimes one very large dose of the thing itself will do it in a night. Only once it has gone all the way quiet, she said. Before that, a dose that size is what switches it off in the first place. The response when it comes back is enormous. Disproportionate was the word she used. "And it only ever goes the one way," Rafael said. "He goes blind to me. I never went blind to him." "It is the alpha nose that does it," she said. "Nobody has ever worked out why. And I have stopped telling omegas that it is fair." "So it's real," Rafael said. "The response is real. What it's responding to is the question." She took her glasses off. "It is not evidence of compatibility. It isn't evidence of anything except that a system which had switched itself off has switched itself back on. In our own literature, it's called rebound. We tell underwriters not to treat it as a sign of a stable pairing, because a great many of them are not stable at all once the novelty settles and the nose goes quiet again. And when it goes quiet again, Rafael said, "What happens then?" Dr. Neve looked at him for a moment, and then she said, in a voice she was clearly trying to make gentle, "Then you are back where you were, dear. And I am sorry, but by then a bond is a permanent thing. Is there anything it doesn't do that to? There is an argument that a bond holds it open," she said. "There is also an argument that people believe that, because they need to. I would not bet a life on either." He drove up the mountain with the heater roaring, and the man he loved was standing in the front window. And Rafael sat in the drive with the engine off and thought, "He did not come after me for 6 years, and he came after me the week I left." Gideon came up the mountain on the Wednesday, in the middle of the afternoon, which was the first thing that was wrong. Nobody came up the mountain in the afternoon. Rafael opened the door to him because that is what he did, and took his coat because that is what he did. And Gideon said, "Thank you," and smelled the way he always did, and looked at Rafael for slightly too long. "Is he in?" "In the study." "Good," Gideon said. "You should probably hear this as well, in fairness." They went in. Lucian was at the desk, and when Rafael sat down, he got up, and went and stood at the window, and stayed there. He looked at his cousin and then at the folder under his cousin's arm, and Rafael watched him work out the whole of it before a word had been said, because that was what the man's mind did. "Sit down, Rafael," Lucian said. "I'll stand." "Sit down." He sat. Gideon put the folder on the desk and did not open it. "The schedule review," he said. "The actuaries found it. I took it out of the file before the file went anywhere. There's a reclassification in it with no case note." He looked at the ceiling as though the name were escaping him. Band 4 to Band 2. Same address as the chairman. Nobody said anything. "Your own credentials are on the line in the system," Gideon said. "So, it isn't an error." Rafael did not understand the shape of it until he looked across at Lucian and saw a man working out an answer he already had. "It's a benefit," Lucian said. Undeclared. 5 years of it. with claims against it. For medicine, Rafael said. His voice sounded like it belonged to somebody else. I've only ever claimed for medicine. It doesn't matter what for, Gideon said, and did not look at him. What do you want? Your chair. At the spring meeting. Health. Your mother's estate. Whatever you like. He tapped the folder twice. Or, I put it to the board. And then it's notifiable, Lucian said, and the policy is voided from the start, and everything paid out on it becomes a debt. Yes. Whose debt? Rafael said. Gideon looked at him for the first time since he had taken his coat, and did not answer. Lucian stood up. Get out of my house, he said. Think about it. Get out of my house. Gideon got his coat himself, and at the door he paused and said, quite pleasantly, For what it's worth, I don't think you're a crook. That's your problem. He put his hat on. The board can forgive a crook. The door shut. The house settled and ticked. Right, Lucian said. He was already moving. I'll deal with it. What does that mean? It means I'll deal with it. He had the phone in his hand. There are 2 people on that board who owe me their seats, and 1 who owes me considerably more than that. I'll want the file pulled before the spring meeting, and I'll want your policy moved to a different carrier this week, out of the group entirely, new underwriting, at whatever they price it, and I pay the difference. Your mother's is on the same account, so that will have to move too. Lucian. And I'll put something in writing about the stair lift so that if anybody starts pulling threads, it's already declared. Lucian. I'll fix it, he said. You are not going to lose anything. Not one thing. Do you understand me? And Rafael, standing in the study where he had found the notebooks, said, There it is. Lucian stopped with the phone at his ear. That's it, Rafael said. That's the whole thing. That's what you've always done. And you cannot even hear yourself doing it. He was shaking. You have not asked me one question. He stood in this room and threatened to take my medicine off me. And you did not turn round and say, Rafael, what do you want to do? You picked up the phone. Because I can end it. I know you can end it. That is not the problem. You have been ending things for me for 6 years without once telling me you were doing it. And I have been walking around inside a life I thought I built. And I did not build it. You built it. His voice went. I don't know which parts are mine. I don't know if I could have kept my mother's house. I don't know if I'd have kept my medicine. Lucian put the phone down on the desk. And then I spent 4 nights on the other side of a door from you, Rafael said. And you could smell me again. That's the whole story, isn't it? That's the entire thing. That is not what this is. I went to see your Dr. Neve. The silence after that was different. She has a word for it too. You people have a word for everything. Rebound. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, angrily. She says it goes quiet again. Rafael, you did not want me for 4 years. He said it as evenly as he could, and it came out in pieces anyway. You sat across a table from me every morning for 4 years, and you were grateful. Your word, grateful, because a man who can't smell me can be trusted. And the week I put my keys on your desk, you came alive. And you want me to believe that's love. And it might just be your nose. It is not my nose. Then prove it in a way that isn't your nose, Rafael said. And don't do it by fixing something. Lucian did not answer that. He stood there with his hand flat on the desk, and Rafael waited, and the clock in the hall went on. And eventually Rafael understood that no answer was coming, because the only tool the man had ever owned was the one he had just been told to put down. He went upstairs and packed a bag. It took him almost no time at all. 6 years. And it fitted in a bag and a box. And the box was mostly books and 1 saucepan that had always been his own. Lucian was in the hall when he came down. He did not block the door. He did not take the bag. He stood well back against the wall with his hands at his sides. And when Rafael reached for the handle, he said, I'll have it dealt with by Friday. Rafael stopped with his hand on the door. Lucian heard it a second after it was out of him, and stood there with the sentence in the room, and did not try to take it back. That was the wrong thing to say, Lucian said. Then, in a voice that was almost steady, would you like me to stop this? You've just told me you're doing it whether I want it or not. I could do it. That isn't the same. He put his hands behind him, flat against the wall, like a man taking his own hands out of the argument. I could stop it in an afternoon. I could have Gideon off that board by the summer, and I could have you insured under a name he has never heard of, and I could make the whole of this go away before you have unpacked. His jaw worked once, and you would never know how. So I am asking. Don't, Rafael said. Don't fix it. Then I won't. I mean it. Not the file, not the board, not my policy. Nothing. If you touch one piece of my life again without asking me first, we're finished. Whatever else happens. Understood. He put the keys on the hall table on his way past, which took him longer than the bag had. Then he got the door open, and the cold came in over the step. That's the worst thing you've ever done to me, he said, without turning round. Standing there and doing nothing. I want you to know it was the right thing, and it is still the worst thing. I know, Lucian said, and Rafael went out and down the steps and put the bag in the car, and he did not look at the window, and the man did not follow him. He took a room above a shoe repair place in the East End, because it was near Hollis and because it was what he could pay for by himself. That first week was the strangest of his life. He kept waking before it was light out of 6 years of habit, in a bed that nobody needed him to get out of. There was no boiler to bleed and nobody's medicine to count. He would get up anyway and stand at a window over a wet street with instant coffee in a mug with a cracked handle, and by the middle of the morning he had run out of things that needed doing, and the rest of the day sat in front of him like a room with no furniture in it. He got work at the restaurant on the hill, running the front of the house most nights, and the books on Mondays. The owner shook his hand and said he had heard about the tart. It paid less than half of what he had earned, and Rafael took it. And on the second Monday he sat down at the little table in his room with the laptop and did the thing he had been afraid of since the study. He applied for his own cover, in his own name, with his own history on it. 19 years old and an admission during a heat and no case note anywhere from anybody. Band 4. The quote came back so high that he laughed out loud in an empty room, and then he sat with his hands over his mouth for a while, and then he set up the payment, and it took a good part of what the restaurant paid him. He paid it. Every month, in full, and it was the proudest thing he had ever done, and he could not tell a single person about it. Hollis had opinions. Band 4, he said. For one night when you were a child. That's the schedule. I know what the schedule is. I've been on it since before you were born. He put his tea down. And you're paying it out of a waiter's wage. I'm paying it because it's mine. Yes, Hollis said. That's the part I'd have liked to be able to say. Emmett rang on the Thursday, and Rafael met him in the same coffee place, because it seemed cowardly to change it, and told him the entire thing from the beginning, and did not leave out the part where he had kissed somebody on a kitchen counter. Emmett listened without touching his coffee. Right, he said at the end. I'm sorry. Don't. Everyone's got somebody. He turned the cup around a few times. Can I ask you something? And you're allowed to be rude about it? Is he actually going to do anything? Or is he going to sit up that mountain being noble at you until you're 40? Rafael did not have an answer. Because I'll be honest with you, Emmett said. If it's the second one, I'd take a proper run at you. I've got a bad kitchen and a good balcony, and I'd have you at the school Christmas thing telling everybody how to do a collar, and I'd be a very happy man. He smiled at his own hands. But you've said his name a lot and mine not at all. His voice had gone flat, and he heard it, and let it stay flat for a second before he pulled it back. I teach 7-year-olds. I know when somebody isn't listening. They shook hands on the corner, and Rafael watched him go up the street in the hat with the ear flaps and stood there in the cold, thinking that somewhere there was a version of his life that was easy, and he had just watched it get on a bus. Nothing came from the mountain for days and days. He counted them. He hated himself for counting them. The house came to him second-hand and in pieces. The girl from the restaurant had a cousin who cleaned there now, and she said the agency people had been in and out, several of them so far, and the last had lasted a few days. Hollis heard from somebody that the chairman had stopped going to lunches. Rafael saw a photograph in a business paper somebody left on a table at work, taken at a thing in an atrium, and the man in it had a face like a coat on a chair. He put the paper in the bin and took it back out again, and then put it back in. Then a box arrived at the shoe repair shop with his name on it in small, square handwriting. He carried it up the stairs and put it on the bed and knew what was in it before he opened it. because he could smell the study on the cardboard, beeswax and ink and old paper. There were a great many of them. On top was a single sheet, and it said, in full, "These are yours. There are no copies. I have not touched anything of yours since you asked me not to, including the file, including Gideon, and I want you to know that this has been the hardest thing I have ever done, and that I am not asking you for anything in return for it." Rafael sat on the bed and read until he had read all of them. He had only read the early ones in the study, the first year and a bit, and he had assumed, without ever putting it to himself, that the books would thin out. That was what happened to feelings. They started loud and they went quiet, and eventually a man stopped writing them down. They did not thin out. They went on through the second year and the third, and then he came to the winter of the ice storm, and there were pages and pages about the corridor, which he had to stop and put down, and then a gap with nothing in it at all, and then a single line, "I cannot find him in the hall anymore. I do not know what has happened to me." And after that, for 4 years, in a hand that never changed and never once got easier, the ledger went on. He has cut his hair badly, did it himself, say nothing. Rang his mother from the office to ask about the stairs. She says he tells her I am a good man. Correct her one day, 5th of March. Nothing today. I looked at him for a long time at breakfast and there is nothing. I have to take it on faith that he is still in the room. He is 30 in the autumn. He will want a child. I have known this for 2 years and I have done nothing about it. And there is no version of the arithmetic where doing nothing is not the same as taking it from him. Rafael put the book down on the bed and put both hands flat on it, and sat there in a rented room above a shoe repair shop while the light went, and understood that he had asked the man to prove it was not his nose, and that the proof had been in a locked drawer the whole time, 4 years of it. He rang the house that night and got no answer, because the man never answered a telephone in his life. So he did the only thing that had ever worked on him. He rang the office in the morning and told the woman on the 4th floor that Rafael was on the line, and there was a click that came so fast she cannot have finished the sentence. "Where are you? Do you know the diner on Pine Avenue?" Rafael said. "The one with the taxi drivers." "Yes, 6 o'clock. And Lucian." His hand was sweating on the phone. "Come as you are. Don't stop anywhere. Don't bring me anything and don't have anything arranged, because if there's a car waiting outside to take me somewhere, I'll walk out." There was a pause. "Understood," Lucian said, and Rafael put the phone down and then had to sit on the floor of the corridor outside the restaurant office for a minute. He got there first. He got there absurdly early and had more coffee than he wanted and watched the door. And when it opened, it was not the man from the photograph in the atrium. It was worse, because at close range you could see it properly. He had lost weight he did not have to lose. He had not slept in a while. He came down the aisle between the booths in a coat with snow on the shoulders, and he stopped a few feet short of the table and did not sit down until he was told to. "Sit down," Rafael said. He sat. "You've read them," Lucian said. "All of them. Then you know I was not doing it for effect. I sent them because they are about you, and you are the only person alive with any right to them." He put his hands on the table and then took them off again. "I have not gone near the file. Gideon has put it to the board for the spring meeting. I want you to hear that from me before anything else, because it means the thing that is coming for you in the spring is still coming, and I have not stopped it, because you told me not to. I know. I need you to say that you understand what I've let happen." "I understand." Rafael's voice was low. "Now say the other thing." And Lucian looked at his hands for a while, and then he did the thing he had never done in 6 years. He spoke first, and badly, and with none of it ready. "I let you spend every heat you have had in that house on your own," he said. "Behind a lock you paid for. You said 24. I never counted them." He stopped. "Because I did not want the number. That is the first thing I am ashamed of. I told myself it was decency. It was not decency. I was frightened of what I would do. And I made you carry the cost of my being frightened. On the floor of that room. In my house. And then I got in a car so I would not have to hear it." Rafael did not say anything. "And when I stopped being able to smell you," Lucian said, "I was relieved, and I have gone over that a great many times now, and it does not get better. I was relieved because it meant I would never have to find out what I was. I let a fault in my own body do the work that I should have done by telling you the truth in the second year and asking you what you wanted. His hands were flat on the table, and they were not steady. And in between, I went round behind your life at night and paid for things and did not tell you. And I thought I was being kind. What I took was your right to know what you could manage on your own. I'm sorry. Not for the money. A waitress came past with the pot and looked at the two of them and went away again without pouring anything. Lucian looked at him for a long moment. I love you, he said. Then, when Rafael did not move, since the second autumn, and I couldn't smell you for 4 years of it, and it made no difference. Then here is what happens next, Rafael said, and you don't get a vote on any of it. He took an envelope out of his coat and put it on the table between the sugar and the ketchup. That's a copy. The original went to the regulator on Monday morning, in my name, before Gideon got anywhere near them. He watched the man's face and enjoyed it, which he was not proud of. I've disclosed the whole thing. The reclassification, the date, the fact that I lived in your house, all of it, and I've enclosed every payment I have made on a policy I took out myself, in my own name, at Band 4, full price, which I have been paying out of a waiter's wage since the day I walked out of your hall. Lucian did not touch the envelope. You did that on your own. I did it on my own. Rafael's chin came up. So when your cousin stands up in the spring and says the policyholder concealed a benefit, there isn't one. There's a man who wrote to them first, and who has been paying the full rate himself since February. He ran out of the sentence he had rehearsed, and had to find the end of it on his own. He can still have you. He can't have me. I've made myself boring. And Lucian put his hand over his eyes, which Rafael had never once seen him do, and sat like that in a diner booth for a while. I would have paid it, he said from behind his hand. I know. That's why I didn't tell you. The spring meeting was on a Tuesday in a room on the 4th floor with the radiators going too hard, and Rafael sat in the row of chairs at the back where the secretaries sit, in his own coat. Gideon had listed him as a person who might be called, which was how he got through the door. He had expected a fight. What he got was quieter and much worse to watch. Gideon took the chair for that item, which he had clearly been waiting a long time to do. Lucian did not defend himself. He stood up when it was reached and said that the reclassification was his, that he had made it alone, that there was no case note because he had not wanted one, and that everything Gideon had put in the paper in front of them was accurate. Somebody said his name in the voice people use for a man walking off a curb. I'd like to put something before you, Lucian said. And then I'd like you to take it before you deal with me. The paper was thin. It had been drafted, Rafael found out later, over many nights in an empty house, by a man who had never written anything on his own before in his life. And it proposed one change to the schedule. The cycle loading came out, all of it. Omega premiums to be priced on what Omega policies actually cost. The group had 30 years of that, and had never once put it against the loading. Because nobody had ever asked the question in a room where it went on the record. The loading came off a table written when the man in the portrait on that floor was a boy. Dr. Neve's people ran it in March, he said. The loading is not supported. It has never been supported. We charge it because we have always charged it, and because everyone else does, and because the people it falls on are not the people who sit in rooms like this one. He put the paper down. I altered one man's rating in the dark because I could not bear what the schedule was doing to him. That was cowardice. I called it kindness at the time. The right thing was to come into this room 5 years ago and say the schedule is wrong, and I did not do it, because I would have had to explain why I cared. Gideon said, mildly, that this was a very expensive apology. It is, Lucian agreed. I'd ask the secretary to take the paper first and my resignation after it, in that order. I'll go at the end of the meeting, today. You've wanted it longer than I've had it, and I am not going to make you wait for the autumn. Rafael, at the back, looked at the floor. They voted. It passed by 2 votes, and one of the 2 would not look at him. Afterwards, there was the noise of people not knowing where to look, and chairs, and Gideon crossing the room to shake his cousin's hand with an expression Rafael could not read and did not care about. Lucian came down the length of the table and past the chairs where the secretaries sit, and stopped. You didn't tell me you'd be here, he said. You'd have arranged something. Yes, He looked at the door, and at the room, and then back down at Rafael. "I've just given away the only thing about me anybody has ever wanted." End quote. "I know. I have no idea what I am after this. I've got some thoughts," Rafael said, and stood up and took the man's hand in front of the entire board of an insurance company older than anyone sitting at it, and walked him out of the room. The bond happened in June, in the house, on a Sunday afternoon with the windows open and the smell of somebody's cut grass coming up the mountain. His last heat had come and gone in May, in the room above the shoe shop, alone, because he wanted to be certain it was not the fever choosing. He told him about it afterwards on the phone. The man listened, and did not offer to fix one single thing, and that was the week Rafael started looking at the calendar. There was no ceremony. Rafael had thought about one and decided he did not want an audience, because he had spent 6 years serving other people's occasions and had no intention of catering his own. So there was a Sunday, and a bed with the light on it, and a man who had been unemployed for a month and had taken up cooking badly, and had that morning ruined a perfectly good piece of fish. "You're sure?" Lucian said again. "Ask me once more and I'll change my mind out of spite." He was not fevered, and neither of them said so. He was entirely himself, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, with a bee going up and down the window and a saucepan soaking in the sink downstairs, and when Lucian's mouth went to the base of his neck, Rafael tipped his head back against the pillow and held the back of the man's neck and said his name once, clearly, so there could never be any argument about it afterwards. The bite hurt. Nobody tells you that either. Then the rest of it came. And it was nothing like the pamphlets. The room stopped being one man's room and started being a room with 2 people in it. Rafael felt something arrive from outside himself, low down and enormous, and recognized it as relief. And it was not his. "Oh," Lucian said into his shoulder. "Oh, I know. Is all of that yours?" "Most of it." He lifted his head. His face had come apart entirely, and he had stopped doing anything about it. "There's a smell in this room," he said. Rafael started laughing, and could not stop, and had to hold on to him. It was not either of them. That was the thing they both kept saying to each other for weeks afterwards, like people who had found something in a garden. It was the smell of a hot iron going over a damp shirt. Neither of them had ever met it before. And it filled that house from the cellar to the roof. And it was still there in the autumn. And neither of them ever said out loud that they were checking. The room at the back, past the laundry, is a nursery now. Rafael did it himself in the autumn, and he took the lock off first, before anything else, before the paint, and he stood in the yard and threw it in the bin and had to be quiet for a minute afterwards. Lucian painted the ceiling and did it badly, and was not allowed to do the second coat. They are careful, at the doctor's, because Rafael is 31 now and there is a history, and there is a chart on the fridge with the visits marked on it in 2 different hands. There is a heartbeat. There is a photograph on the door of the study where the notebooks used to live. The regulator's letter came in August. 2 pages, a finding against the group, a condition on the license, and nothing at all against Rafael. His mother's cover is in her own name now, and so is the stairlift. And it took a Sunday and 1 phone call and cost nobody anything. Hollis is in the front room downstairs, in the good chair by the window that looks at the city, because the residents in the East End could not manage his hip, and because Rafael went and got him and did not ask anybody's permission. He complains about the noise the boiler makes. He is going to be somebody's grandfather in the spring, and he has already said, twice, that he intends to be insufferable about it. Lucian works part of the week for a small outfit that fights insurers, which pays a fraction of what he used to earn and which he loves in a way that embarrasses him. The schedule went through in the spring. It came into force in the autumn. 2 other carriers followed inside the year, because it is cheaper to follow than to explain. And there are omegas on all 3 sets of books who are paying less now for reasons they will never know, and Rafael thinks about them sometimes when he is doing the accounts on Tuesdays. He does the accounts on Tuesdays because he is the one who is good at it. Not because anybody pays him. He runs the house. He has always run the house. The difference is that his name is on the deed of it now, next to another name, and there is nobody in that building who could tell you which of them is the staff, because there isn't any. On a morning at the end of the year, with the snow coming down past the kitchen window in that slow, unhurried way, He put a white cup down in front of his mate and sat on the edge of the table instead of standing. "Can I ask you something?" Lucian said. "You can ask. That first winter, when you told me about the kitchen and the child and the house with your name on it." He turned the cup a quarter turn on the saucer. "Was there ever a version where you said yes to me in that office, straight away?" Rafael thought about it properly, because the man deserved an answer. "No," he said. "You'd have gone on doing it in the dark. I'd have found the notebooks in 10 years and I'd have left you in the drive. That's what I thought. Ask me now, though." Lucian looked up. "Go on," Rafael said. "You've never once asked it when it was safe." And the man who used to be the chairman of a life and health group put down his cup and said, "Why not me?" "Because you didn't know what I smelled like," Rafael said. "You know now." The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.